The queen was aging and now ordered her daughter to marry me. The castle of Eldrath rose like a jagged crown over the city, its towers piercing the pale sky, its walls ancient and proud. Carved from stone that had seen centuries, it whispered tales of kings and queens, of battles long forgotten, and of secrets buried in shadow. The streets below bustled with life, but inside the castle, silence ruled. Here every footstep echoed, every whisper carried weight, and every glance could change a destiny. The queen, Lady Seraphine, sat in her high chamber, draped in gowns the color of midnight and silver, her hair streaked with threads of gray. She was aging, her beauty fading slowly, but her presence remained commanding. Her sharp eyes, still bright and calculating, scanned the parchment before her. She had made a decision, one that would ripple across the kingdom. It was time for her daughter to marry, but not to a prince, not to a noble lord, but to a stranger. The castle gates opened with a groan, and a messenger hurried in, carrying news wrapped in silk. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "he has arrived, the one you summoned." Queen Seraphine did not speak. She merely nodded, and the messenger left. The decision had been made in the quiet of her chambers weeks before. It was final, and there would be no turning back. Outside the castle walls, the young man she had summoned rode swiftly through the cobblestone streets. His name was Kale, a figure known only by a few in the royal court. His eyes were sharp, dark, and observant. His movements were careful, as if each step was measured, each word calculated. He carried with him no grandeur, no royal trappings, only a quiet air of authority. The people in the streets glanced at him, whispering to each other. Who was he? Why had the queen summoned him? Kale dismounted at the castle gates, his boots thudding against the stone. Guards watched him carefully, eyes narrowed, but they allowed him entry. Something about him, they thought, did not belong to the common world. They felt the pull of mystery in his presence. He was led through halls filled with shadows, the walls adorned with tapestries depicting battles, feasts, and rulers long dead. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax, a scent both comforting and heavy with history. Finally, he was brought before the queen. Seraphine rose from her chair, her posture regal despite the weariness that time had etched into her bones. "You are Kale," she said, her voice smooth, commanding. "The one I have chosen to marry my daughter." Kale bowed respectfully, though his eyes never left hers. "Your Majesty," he said simply, "I am at your service." The queen studied him, searching for hesitation or pride, but found neither. Instead, she saw a quiet strength, a will tempered like steel. It pleased her. "You will marry Princess Alara," she said. "Whether you wish it or not, this is the will of the crown." Kale's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Words were unnecessary. He had anticipated such commands, yet even he felt a ripple of unease. The princess, Alara, was rumored to be strong-willed, clever, and proud. Many who had tried to court her had failed, not by lack of charm or wealth, but because she would not be controlled. Before he could respond, the queen motioned to a servant. "Bring her to me," she commanded. Moments later, the princess appeared. Alara moved with a grace that seemed effortless, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes a vivid green that seemed to pierce the soul. She was young, yet the intelligence and fire within her were evident. She stopped a few steps from her mother, her gaze meeting Kale's. The silence between them was sharp. Neither spoke at first, only studying each other as if measuring the weight of their destinies. "You are Kale," Alara said finally, her voice soft but firm. "I have heard of you," Kale inclined his head, "and I have heard of you, princess." His words were polite, careful, neutral, but there was a hint of curiosity beneath them. Alara's eyes narrowed slightly. "The queen has chosen poorly if she thinks I will accept a stranger simply because she commands it." The queen's lips curved in a faint smile. "Alara, you will learn that obedience is sometimes necessary. This marriage will secure the kingdom. And in time you may find that what seems unwelcome now may bring strength later." Alara's gaze flicked to her mother, then back to Kale. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the tension, the stakes, the unknown. Kale sensed it immediately. The princess was not afraid to challenge him. He, in turn, felt a strange pull toward her, an unspoken connection that neither of them could yet name. That evening, Kale was escorted to his chambers within the castle. The room was austere, yet comfortable, lit by a single flickering lantern. He set down his belongings and walked to the window, gazing at the city below. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow over the stone streets and the rivers that wound through the kingdom like silver threads. Kale's thoughts were restless. The queen's choice was strange, unpredictable, and dangerous. He wondered why she had summoned him, what she hoped to gain. And then there was Alara, proud, intelligent, untamed. How would she react when she realized this was not a simple command, but a binding decree that could change the course of her life? Night descended, and with it came a chill that seeped into the castle's halls. Kale wrapped his cloak tighter around his shoulders and made his way toward the princess's quarters. He did not intend to intrude, only to understand. Outside Alara's door, he paused. From within, he could hear her soft humming, a song that seemed both melancholy and strong. Taking a deep breath, he knocked lightly. "Who is it?" Alara's voice was wary. "It is Kale," he said. "I wish to speak." There was a long pause, then cautiously the door opened. Alara stood in the threshold, her green eyes alert. "What do you want?" Kale stepped inside, bowing slightly. "To understand," he said simply. "I do not wish to enter your life unbidden. I only wish to know what you think, what you feel, before the world decides for us." Alara studied him, suspicion and curiosity warring within her. Finally, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. "Very well," she said. "But know this, I will not be won by words alone." Kale nodded, accepting her challenge. And in that moment, a subtle tension began to weave between them, an invisible thread of curiosity, defiance, and unspoken possibility. Over the following days, Kale and Alara were forced into proximity. Lessons in court etiquette, walks through the castle gardens, and shared dinners created moments of quiet observation. Each measured the other's temperament, each tested boundaries, each discovered fragments of truth beneath the facades. Alara, though guarded, began to notice Kale's steadiness. He was not boastful, not easily swayed, and yet he did not retreat from her fire. Kale, in turn, found her mind sharp, her wit fearless, and beneath her pride, a vulnerability she did not willingly reveal. But the queen's presence was never far. Seraphine watched from her chambers and behind her curtains, ensuring every word and glance was calculated. She understood the power of influence, of control, and she knew that Kale and Alara were stronger together, but only if molded carefully. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the western towers, Kale found himself alone in the castle library, surrounded by books that smelled of old paper and secrets. He had come seeking knowledge of the kingdom's history, of the queen's lineage, of any hints of why he had been summoned. Alara entered quietly, her footsteps soft against the stone floor. She did not speak, only observed him from the shadows. "You are thorough," she said finally. "You do not accept anything at face value." Kale looked up, a faint smile brushing his lips. "It is wise not to," he said. "The world is often not what it seems, and in this castle that is doubly true." Alara's lips curved into a faint smile as well. "Perhaps you will survive here longer than most." Their eyes met, and for a moment the walls of the castle, the weight of duty, and the commands of the queen seemed to vanish. Two strangers bound by fate stood in a quiet understanding. But as the candlelight flickered, casting shadows on the walls, a chill swept through the library. Kale felt it first, a subtle shift in the air, a whisper that seemed almost alive. He did not speak of it. Alara, sensing the change, stiffened, her hand brushing against a book. The castle was alive, it seemed, with secrets. And Kale understood, as did Alara in her own way, that their lives were no longer simply their own. They were threads in a tapestry far larger, a story that had begun long before their birth and would not end until both choice and destiny were reconciled. As the night deepened, they parted, Alara to her chambers, Kale to his. Each lay awake, thoughts tangled with questions, anticipation, and a strange, unnameable emotion. Outside, the wind whispered through the towers, carrying with it a warning. The union commanded by the queen would awaken forces long dormant, and neither Kale nor Alara could foresee the consequences. The first chapter of their story had begun, not with love, not with certainty, but with tension, curiosity, and the shadow of destiny looming over them both. And in the quiet of the castle, the walls seemed to murmur. The crown will choose, but hearts may rebel. The sun rose slowly over Eldrath, casting a pale light across the castle towers. Mist lingered in the courtyards, curling around the stone statues like ghostly fingers. The kingdom was quiet, yet beneath its silence, a restless tension stirred. The queen had spoken her command, and now the threads of destiny began to pull tighter around Kale and Princess Alara. Kale walked through the gardens, the dew soaking the tips of his boots. He observed the carefully tended flowers, the fountains that sparkled in the early light, and the statues that watched silently. Everything in the castle seemed deliberate, controlled, even beautiful, but he sensed an underlying shadow. The queen's hand was in every corner, every order, every expectation. Yet among the beauty, Kale felt the first stirrings of freedom, fragile and fleeting, in the moments when the castle seemed to breathe with him, rather than against him. Ilara appeared at the far end of the garden, standing beneath an arch of climbing roses. She wore a simple gown, soft as morning fog, her dark hair tied back to reveal the sharp line of her jaw. She was watching him, though she pretended to admire the roses. Kale noticed immediately her eyes never left him. "You come here often," she said, her voice calm but carrying a hidden challenge. "I like the quiet," Kale replied. "It gives space to think, and sometimes it reveals truths you cannot find in the halls of the castle." Ilara's gaze sharpened. "Truths, are you speaking of yourself or me?" Kale smiled faintly. "Perhaps both, perhaps also of the queen." Her lips curved into a small, wry smile. "You are bold, Kale. Many would not dare speak so freely, but perhaps the queen has underestimated you." Kale's eyes darkened slightly. "Perhaps she has underestimated more than me." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind stirred the roses above them, petals drifting down like soft rain. In that silence, a subtle understanding passed between them, a recognition of the strange bond forming, one that neither wanted but both could not ignore. The days passed in a rhythm of study and observation. Kale and Ilara were paired for lessons in history, politics, and strategy. They were forced to navigate the queen's expectations while discovering each other's minds. Kale admired Ilara's intelligence, the way her mind moved like water, fast and careful. She challenged him at every turn, and he respected her for it. Ilara, in turn, observed Kale's patience and quiet strength. He did not seek to impress her with grandeur or wealth. He simply existed with a presence that demanded attention, a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm of court politics. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in his presence, a pull she could not name, though she resisted it fiercely. Yet the queen's shadow loomed over every interaction. Seraphine watched from the upper balconies, from behind curtains, and sometimes in the guise of chance meetings in the corridors. She smiled faintly to herself when Kale and Ilara's emotions flickered across their faces. Frustration, curiosity, surprise. She understood that tension could be shaped, that desires could be guided, and that the path she had chosen might yet bring the strength she sought for her kingdom. One evening, a chill swept through the castle. Kale had been studying in the library when the air shifted suddenly, as if the walls themselves were breathing. A soft whisper reached his ears, a voice that seemed older than the castle itself. He paused, hand resting on the edge of the table, listening. "Ilara," the voice seemed to sigh. "Beware the choice you make." Kale's heart quickened, but he found nothing. No one was in the library. The candles flickered, shadows dancing along the walls. He shook his head, wondering if his mind was weaving fears from the tales of the past. Yet the feeling remained. Something was watching, waiting, testing. Later that night, Kale found Ilara in the garden again, standing beneath the same arch of roses. She was silent, staring at the stars, her hands clasped before her. "You came out here alone?" Kale asked, keeping his voice low. Ilara turned, her eyes reflecting moonlight. "I needed air," she said softly, "and answers, questions I cannot ask my mother." Kale approached, careful to give her space. "Perhaps I can help," he said. "I do not know all answers, but sometimes sharing questions brings clarity." Ilara's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You speak boldly for someone who is to be my husband, bold and cautious somehow." Kale smiled faintly. "I have learned that caution often saves lives, yet boldness is necessary to shape them." They walked through the garden in silence, the path lit by soft lanterns swinging gently in the night breeze. Neither mentioned the queen, yet both understood her presence in the shadows. In the quiet of the night, the tension between them shifted. Curiosity became fascination, and fascination hinted at something deeper, something neither dared to name. As days passed, small incidents reminded them that the castle was not merely a home. It was a living entity, tied to magic long forgotten. Strange shadows moved along the walls when no one was there. Whispers curled through corridors, unintelligible yet urgent. Servants spoke of flickering lights, of feelings of being watched, of cold drafts that followed no breeze. Kale and Ilara began to notice these things as well. One evening in the northern tower, a door opened before them, revealing a hallway that neither had seen before. The walls were lined with mirrors that did not reflect their images, only shifting shapes that seemed alive. Alara's hand trembled slightly as she touched the cool surface. "This is strange," she whispered. Kale placed a hand over hers, steadying her. "The castle holds secrets," he said. "Perhaps some are meant to be discovered slowly, carefully, together." They explored cautiously, their bond strengthening through shared discovery and the thrill of the unknown. Each moment of quiet intimacy built trust, and each glance and brush of a hand hinted at feelings neither could fully acknowledge. But the queen's influence was never far. Seraphine knew the castle's mysteries, and she knew how to use them. One night she summoned Alara to her chambers. The princess obeyed, though reluctance laced her steps. "My daughter," the queen said, her voice soft but unyielding, "you feel the pull toward him. Do not mistake it for weakness. Strength can grow from understanding, even from those you do not choose." Alara's eyes narrowed. "And if he betrays me, or if I betray him," the queen smiled faintly. "Then you will learn. The castle tests all who live within it. It shapes them, molds them, reveals truths. And sometimes the choices you fear most are the ones that define you." Alara left the chamber with a heavy heart, the queen's words echoing in her mind. She did not yet trust Kale fully, nor did she understand the strange pull she felt toward him. Yet she knew that the threads of fate were weaving tighter around them, and that resistance might not be enough to escape what was coming. That night, Kale and Alara met again, drawn as if by some unseen force. The moon hung low in the sky, its light casting silver shadows across the castle grounds. They walked in silence until finally Alara spoke. "Do you feel it?" she asked. "The way the castle watches us?" Kale nodded. "Yes. It is as if it waits, testing us, seeing who we truly are beneath our masks." Alara hesitated, then asked, "Do you trust me?" Kale looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her question. "I do," he said. "But trust is earned in the moments we share and the choices we make when no one else sees." Her gaze softened slightly, though her pride remained intact. "Then we will earn it," she said quietly. As the night deepened, a distant sound echoed through the towers, a soft, almost imperceptible chant carried by the wind. Kale stiffened, sensing the presence of something old, powerful, and watching. Alara noticed his tension and shivered. "We are not alone," she whispered. "No," Kale said, "and perhaps that is not a threat but a warning, a reminder that our choices carry weight far beyond this castle." The night stretched on, filled with quiet anticipation, as Kale and Alara stood beneath the stars. They had begun to understand each other, yet much remained hidden, secrets of the queen, of the castle, and of their own hearts. The tension between them was no longer mere curiosity. It had grown into something fragile, intense, and impossible to ignore. And somewhere in the shadows, the castle seemed to breathe, as if alive. Whispers wound through the halls, candles flickered despite still air, and the unseen presence lingered, observing. The prophecy that had been murmured in secret long ago seemed closer now, ready to awaken. Kale and Alara parted that night, each returning to their chambers, yet neither could sleep. Thoughts of the other and of the castle's mysteries tangled with dreams of what might come. Outside, the wind whispered through the towers. "The union is foretold, but the heart may defy what destiny demands." And so the story moved forward, drawing them closer, testing their courage, and revealing that the castle of Eldrath held more than stone and shadow. It held the power to shape the fate of two hearts bound by duty, curiosity, and a pull that neither could resist. Storm clouds gathered over Eldrath, dark and heavy, rolling across the horizon like restless beasts. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the jagged spires of the castle in brief, violent flashes. The wind whipped through the halls, rattling doors and stirring the heavy curtains. It was a night that seemed made for secrets, for truths hidden in shadow, and for hearts that beat faster than the pulse of the storm. Kale stood in the northern tower, staring out at the churning sky. His hands rested on the stone sill, feeling its cold solidity. The storm mirrored the turmoil within him, a mixture of frustration, curiosity, and a growing awareness of the strange pull toward Princess Alara. Though he had not yet allowed himself to name it, he knew that something was shifting between them. Footsteps echoed behind him. He did not turn immediately. "Alara," he said softly as the princess approached. Her cloak flapped in the wind and her hair was wild from the storm. "You shouldn't be here." I could say the same to you, she replied, her voice carrying over the gusts. The storm is dangerous. The tower is high, and yet we are both here. Is it fate or foolishness? Cale turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the lightning outside. Perhaps a little of both, he said. But some risks are necessary, and some truths cannot wait for calmer skies. Alara's gaze softened for a moment, though her pride remained intact. Then speak, she said. Tell me what stirs within you. I will not pretend to be blind to the tension between us. Cale hesitated, feeling the weight of her words. The princess was fearless in ways few could be. To her, words were weapons, shields, and keys all at once. I do not wish to overstep, he began. But I feel drawn to you. There is a force here in this castle that pushes us together and yet tests us. I cannot explain it, nor would I try to ignore it. Alara stepped closer, the wind whipping her cloak around her like living shadow. I feel it too, she admitted, though quickly she looked away. And yet I am bound by duty, by the Queen's command, by expectations that I cannot simply abandon. And you, do you feel the same, or is it merely caution dressed as concern? Cale took a step forward, closing the distance, though he remained careful. It is not caution, he said. It is awareness, but awareness does not prevent feelings from taking root. I cannot ignore them. Alara's breath caught. For a fleeting moment they were silent, only the storm filling the space between them. And then, without another word, she turned and moved toward the balcony, letting the wind carry her cloak like a banner. Cale followed, matching her stride. Lightning split the sky again, and in its brief light they saw each other clearly, not just as strangers bound by royal command, but as two souls caught in a web of fate, curiosity, and something deeper that neither could yet name. Yet the castle did not remain idle. The Queen's machinations moved unseen, threading through halls and shadows. Seraphine knew the tension growing between her daughter and Cale, and she understood that emotions could be dangerous in ways even her control could not anticipate. She had long ago decided that strength could only be tested through fire, and fire was what she would now unleash. That evening, the Queen summoned her most trusted advisor, a man named Lord Varin, known for his cunning and knowledge of ancient lore. He must not falter, she said, her eyes dark and calculating. The boy must be tested, and the princess must understand her place. The castle itself will aid me if necessary. Lord Varin bowed. Your Majesty, he said, the castle's magic is ancient. It can be guided but not controlled. The threads are delicate. One misstep and the balance may break. The Queen's lips curved in a faint smile. Then let it break and be remade. Strength arises from challenge, and the union will not be denied. Meanwhile, Cale and Alara discovered new signs of the castle's living nature. In the halls of the northern tower, doors appeared where none had been. Staircases shifted subtly, and the shadows sometimes moved as if aware of their presence. One evening, they came across a hall lined with mirrors, but the reflections were not their own. Instead, the glass seemed to show them as they could be, stronger, darker, more capable, and also as they feared themselves to be, vulnerable, afraid, uncertain. This is unsettling, Alara said softly, her hand brushing the surface of a mirror. It shows what could be, what we might become, and what we fear most. How can we trust anything here? Cale's hand hovered near hers, not touching, but his presence steadied her. Perhaps trust is not in what the mirrors show, but in what we choose to face together. Shadows and reflections can deceive, but courage cannot. Alara looked at him, feeling a warmth that defied the chill of the hall. Yet before she could respond, a sudden noise echoed through the corridor, a whisper low and urgent, almost like a warning. Both turned sharply, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing moved, and yet the feeling of being observed did not leave them. Days passed with increasing tension. The Queen's unseen manipulations became more apparent. Messages were sent, misdirection was crafted, and rumors began to spread in the castle. Cale was rumored to be plotting, Alara to be defying her mother. Their every action was scrutinized, every choice interpreted, and every glance examined. The atmosphere became a powder keg of suspicion, longing, and fear. One night, while Cale was walking through the halls, he was confronted by Lord Varin. The advisor's eyes were sharp, calculating. "Do you understand what you have stepped into?" he asked quietly. "The castle watches, the Queen watches, and the prophecy waits. Do not mistake your feelings for safety. You are both in danger." Cale's jaw tightened. "I understand more than you think, but I will not abandon her. Whatever awaits, I face it." Varin's gaze lingered, sharp and almost warning. Be careful, even love can be a trap if the heart is blinded. Later that night, Alara stood on her balcony, staring into the storm. She felt the pull of destiny, the weight of the queen's will, and the unspoken bond growing between her and Kale. A gust of wind carried a whisper, almost audible in the thunder. "Beware," it seemed to say. "Trust must be earned and betrayal waits in shadows." Alara's heart thudded. She sensed that their path would not be easy, that danger was not only outside the castle walls but also within. Yet she also knew that Kale was different from others. He had not sought to impress, to control, or to command. He had only existed beside her, steady and unwavering, a counterbalance to her own fire. The next morning the storm passed, leaving the castle washed in pale sunlight. Kale found Alara in the gardens again. She was standing beneath the roses, her hands clasped, her eyes thoughtful. "You heard the whispers," he said quietly. "I felt them too." Alara shook her head. "Not all whispers are truth," she said. "Some are warnings, some are lies, and some are merely the voice of fear." Kale stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Then let us face them together. We cannot control the castle or the queen or the prophecy, but we can choose how we move forward." Alara's eyes softened, the tension between them easing slightly. "Then we must be careful," she said. "But perhaps we must also be brave." They spent the day together, exploring the castle, speaking in quiet tones, sharing stories and secrets that neither had revealed to anyone else. Each moment brought them closer, yet the undercurrent of danger remained. Shadows seemed deeper, whispers more urgent, and the queen's influence always just beyond reach. Even as they laughed and talked, the sense of betrayal and testing remained. The queen's eyes were everywhere, and her agents moved like ghosts through the halls. Kale and Alara knew that the castle itself had secrets that could test them, challenge them, and even threaten to undo the fragile bond growing between them. That night, Kale was awoken by a soft knock at his door. Alara stood there, her eyes wide, her voice urgent. "Something is happening," she whispered. "I felt it in the gardens, the shadows, they are moving differently, the castle is awake." Kale rose immediately. "Then we must see," he said, "together." They moved through the castle in silence, hearts pounding, eyes scanning the shadows. The corridors seemed to twist unnaturally, doors appearing where there were none, staircases shifting subtly. Whispers filled the air, unintelligible yet insistent. And in the northern tower they came face to face with a vision, a shadow of the queen, older and more terrifying, yet somehow distant. "It watches us," Alara said, voice trembling slightly. "It knows our hearts, our choices, our fears." Kale took her hand, steadying her. "Then we will not falter," he said. "We face it together." The vision dissipated as lightning split the sky once more, leaving them in darkness and silence, but neither moved immediately. Their hands remained entwined, and in that simple touch, they found courage, warmth, and connection that the castle's shadows could not take away. And yet the night ended with a warning carried on the wind, faint but certain. The union foretold is more than destiny. It is a test, and betrayal waits where trust is weakest. The storm had passed, but its echo remained. Kale and Alara understood that their journey was only beginning, that the castle's secrets would not yield easily, and that their hearts were caught between desire, duty, and the shadows that moved unseen. In the quiet of the northern tower, they parted, each carrying the weight of the night in their hearts. Outside, the castle whispered and waited, alive and watching, preparing the next trial, the next choice, and the next fire to test them both. The night in Eldrath was deep and silent, but the castle itself was restless. Shadows twisted along the corridors, moving as if alive, and the faintest whispers curled through the halls. The wind howled outside the towers, rattling the windows and carrying with it a chill that seemed to reach into the heart. Within this strange, uneasy calm, Kale and Alara felt the weight of the queen's will pressing upon them, even when she was nowhere in sight. Kale had been restless for hours. He could not sleep, not with the echoes of the castle whispering warnings and the sense of unseen eyes watching him. He rose quietly from his bed and moved through the hallways, careful not to wake the servants. The castle seemed almost alive in the night. The stone walls breathed faintly. The tapestries shifted as though stirred by a breeze that did not exist, and every shadow seemed to watch him. He found Alara in the northern gardens, standing beneath the moonlight, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. She had been waiting, he realized. Perhaps she felt the same pull he did, the magnetic tension that drew them together when the world was at its quietest. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low so as not to disturb the silence of the night. And yet here I am, she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The castle, it calls us, Kale, or perhaps it is the queen who calls through shadows and whispers. Kale stepped closer. Perhaps it is both, he said, but if we face it together, we will not be undone. I do not fear the queen's command as much as I fear what happens if we ignore the truths the castle shows us. Alara nodded, her eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon. Then let us see, she whispered. The castle will not reveal its secrets to one alone. They moved through the gardens in silence, the cold dew soaking the hem of Alara's gown. The air was thick with anticipation, and every rustle of leaves seemed amplified. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the paths, and the statues of past kings and queens seemed to watch with intent eyes. Kale reached the gates of the eastern tower and hesitated. This part of the castle was rarely entered, even by the royals. The stones felt older here, darker, as if absorbing the night rather than reflecting it. Alara placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Once we enter, there may be no turning back." Kale nodded. "I am certain. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together." The doors creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The walls were damp and cold, the torches along the path flickering weakly. A strange, almost musical whisper echoed through the hall, and both paused, listening. "Do you hear that?" Alara asked, gripping his arm lightly. Kale nodded. "It's the castle or something older. We must move carefully." As they descended, the air grew colder, carrying a scent of earth and stone, of something long hidden. At the bottom of the staircase, they found a hall lined with carved pillars, each etched with runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. The runes pulsed softly, as if alive, their light ebbing and flowing like the beat of a heart. Alara stepped forward, her hand brushing the surface of a pillar. "These runes, they are not merely decoration. They are warnings or guides, perhaps both." Kale studied the carvings, recognizing shapes that hinted at protection spells, binding, and something else. A warning. "The queen knows these exist," he said softly. "She does not show all her cards, but these runes, they are older than even she is. We must respect them." A sudden movement in the shadows made them both step back. A figure emerged, cloaked in darkness. The hood obscured the face, but the presence was unmistakable. Lord Varin stepped forward, his eyes flickering with caution and urgency. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "The castle tests those who enter these halls. Many have been lost to the darkness here." Alara's hand tightened on Kale's arm. "Then guide us," she said. "Do not leave us to face it alone." Varin's gaze shifted between them. "I can guide, but you must listen. The castle responds to courage and to heart. Fear and hesitation will only strengthen the shadows." Kale nodded. "Then we move with courage together." The trio moved deeper into the hall. Shadows stretched and twisted around them, moving as if alive. Whispers rose and fell like a chant, unintelligible yet insistent. Alara's grip on Kale's hand tightened as the temperature dropped, and frost began forming along the edges of the pillars. At the center of the hall, they found a circular chamber. The floor was etched with a pattern of interlocking runes that pulsed with light, and at the center lay a small pedestal, on which rested a crystal glowing faintly blue. The whispers grew louder, and the air seemed to hum with energy. "This is extraordinary," Kale said, stepping forward cautiously. "The heart of the castle's power, perhaps, or a test designed by the queen herself." Alara approached the pedestal, her eyes fixed on the crystal. "It calls to me," she whispered. "Do you feel it?" Kale did. A warmth, gentle but insistent, spread through his chest, a pull that urged him closer to the crystal, to the truth it guarded. "Yes," he said softly, "but we must be careful. The castle watches. It tests." They reached the pedestal together, hands brushing the crystal. A surge of light filled the chamber, and visions flashed before their eyes. They saw themselves, together facing danger, defying the queen, surviving trials of courage and trust. They also saw threats, shadows of betrayal, enemies cloaked in guise, whispers that promised ruin. Alara gasped, stepping back. "It shows possibilities, futures that could be if we fail and if we succeed." Kale placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then we succeed," he said firmly. "Together, the castle may test us, but our hearts will not falter if we stand united." A faint sound echoed through the chamber, soft, almost mournful, a whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Trust is your shield, desire is your guide, betrayal waits where hearts are weakest." Alara shivered. "Then we must be stronger than the shadows," she said, meeting Kale's gaze. They left the chamber, emerging into the halls once more. Though the storm outside had faded, the tension within the castle had grown. Every shadow now seemed a potential threat, every whisper a reminder that the Queen's influence stretched further than they could see. Yet Kale and Alara felt something stronger between them, a bond forged in shared trials, strengthened by courage, and tempered by the knowledge that their choices would shape the path ahead. The next days brought no relief. The Queen increased her demands, testing their patience and endurance. Kale and Alara were forced to navigate politics, strategy, and the subtle games of court, all while sensing the castle's eyes upon them. Each encounter, each whispered message, each subtle challenge from the Queen was a reminder that the world outside the northern gardens and hidden chambers was dangerous, and that trust must be earned in a place where deception was a constant companion. Yet in stolen moments, Kale and Alara found glimpses of peace. They walked along the castle walls at dawn, spoke softly in the gardens at twilight, and shared laughter that echoed against stone walls. Each moment built trust, each glance sparked something unspoken, and each touch, a hand resting briefly on another, was a silent promise of courage, connection, and resilience. But danger was never far. One evening, as Kale returned to his chambers, he found a note slipped under the door. It was written in careful, flowing script. "Beware the one who smiles, for they may carry shadow in their heart. Trust only what courage reveals, not what appearances hide." Kale's eyes narrowed. The Queen's influence was subtle, her agents unseen, her warnings carried by whispers and written messages alike. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He knew he must remain vigilant, not only for himself but for Alara. That night he found her in the eastern tower, standing beneath a window that overlooked the city. She was wrapped in her cloak, eyes distant, lips pressed together. "They test us constantly," she said without turning. "Every word, every glance, every choice, nothing is without consequence." Kale approached quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then we will test them in return," he said softly. "Not with force, but with courage, with patience, and with our hearts. Whatever they throw at us, we face it together." Alara turned to him, her eyes meeting his. In their depths, he saw understanding, determination, and something deeper, a longing she did not yet dare to name. "Together," she whispered. The castle, alive with shadows and whispers, seemed to shift around them, as if acknowledging their alliance. Yet outside, the wind carried a final warning through the towers. The heart must be strong, the bond must be unbroken, and the shadows will test until only truth remains. Kale and Alara understood then that their journey was far from over. The Queen's influence, the castle's magic, and the threats that lurked in both shadow and light would continue to challenge them. But they also understood something stronger. Their connection, fragile yet unyielding, was a force the castle could not break. And as the moonlight washed over the towers, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, bound by courage, trust, and a growing, undeniable bond. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the castle of Eldrath, painting the towers in gold and silver. The night had passed, but its echoes lingered, shadows in the halls, whispers in the wind, and the memory of trials that had tested hearts and courage alike. Kale stood on the balcony of the northern tower, staring out across the kingdom, the rising sun reflecting in his dark eyes. Every shadow of the past nights weighed heavily upon him, yet he felt a strange clarity. The final challenge awaited, and he was ready. Alara joined him silently, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her green eyes, bright in the morning light, held determination and calm, yet beneath it was the memory of fear, of trials, and of the strange pull that destiny had cast over her life. "The Queen," she said softly, her voice carrying across the balcony. "She knows, she will act today," Kale nodded, "and we will face her together." They descended into the castle, the halls echoing under their footsteps. The Queen's presence was everywhere, yet she did not appear. It was as if the castle itself had become her instrument, moving whispers, shifting corridors, and testing the loyalty, courage, and hearts of those who lived within it. At the heart of the castle, in the grand hall, Queen Seraphina waited. She sat upon her throne, her robes gleaming in the morning light, her silver hair framing her stern, regal face. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, met theirs with the weight of command and the knowledge of centuries. "You have come," she said, her voice calm yet edged with authority. "And you have survived the trials of the castle. That is commendable, yet not sufficient." Kale stepped forward, his posture steady. We do not seek to escape the trials, your majesty. We only wish to prove that our hearts, when united, can face any challenge. The castle may test us, the world may test us, but together we are strong. Alara joined him, her hand brushing against his as a silent signal of solidarity. We are ready, she said, not just for your command, but for what must be done to protect the kingdom and each other. The queen studied them for a long moment. Then, with a subtle motion of her hand, the shadows in the hall seemed to grow, swirling and twisting like living smoke. The castle itself responded to her will, testing their courage, patience, and trust. Then face the final trial, she said. Show me that love and duty can coexist, that courage and heart are stronger than fear and shadow. The shadows surged forward, forming shapes that resembled creatures of nightmare, yet not fully real. They moved silently but with menace, circling Kale and Alara. The hall seemed to expand and twist as if the castle itself had become a labyrinth. Kale gripped Alara's hand tightly. Do not fear, he said. We are together, that is our strength. Alara nodded, feeling courage rise within her. Then let us show the castle our hearts. Step by step, they moved forward, facing the illusions and challenges. The shadows tested them, showing visions of betrayal, failure, and loss. Kale saw images of himself falling, of Alara taken from him by forces beyond his control. Alara saw visions of the queen's power overwhelming her, of Kale struck down, and of the kingdom in ruin. Yet each time they looked to each other, finding strength in the bond that had grown through whispered conversations, shared discoveries, and quiet moments of trust. With each step they dispelled a shadow, not by force but by courage, trust, and unity. The queen watched silently from her throne, a faint smile on her lips. She saw the moments where Kale and Alara faltered, and yet rose again, stronger for it. She understood that the castle's magic could test them, but it could not break the bond they had forged. Finally, they reached the center of the hall, where a pedestal held a crystal that glowed with a soft, blue light. The shadows recoiled as they approached, unable to penetrate the circle of trust and courage that surrounded them. Kale and Alara stepped together, placing their hands on the crystal. The light flared brightly, filling the hall with warmth. The shadows dissolved, whispering faintly as if acknowledging defeat. The castle seemed to breathe, its pulse slowing, its walls steady once more. The queen rose from her throne, her eyes softer now, yet still filled with authority. You have passed, she said. Not through obedience alone, but through courage, understanding, and trust. You have proven that love can coexist with duty, that hearts united can face shadow and fear alike. Alara lowered her hand from the crystal, turning to Kale with a smile that was equal parts relief and triumph. We did it, she whispered. Kale smiled back, his hand brushing hers. Together, he said. The queen's gaze softened further, though her presence remained commanding. The prophecy spoke of trials, of darkness, and of choice. You have chosen wisely. The kingdom is safe, and the bond you share has been tempered like steel. Never forget the lessons of the castle. Alara bowed her head respectfully. We will not, your majesty. Kale inclined his head as well. And we will protect what we have earned for the kingdom and for each other. Outside, the sun rose higher, bathing the city in golden light. The streets below were alive with people beginning their day, unaware of the trials that had occurred in the shadows of the castle. Kale and Alara stepped onto the balcony, hands intertwined, and gazed out at the horizon. We are free, Alara said softly, her voice filled with wonder. The castle has tested us, but we endured. We have each other now. Kale nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. And we will face whatever comes next together. Nothing can undo what we have proven. Not fear, not shadow, not even destiny itself. The castle behind them seemed quieter now, its magic still alive but no longer threatening. The queen had withdrawn her influence, acknowledging that Kale and Alara's bond was genuine, strong, and unbreakable. Yet as they stood together, a subtle breeze carried a whisper, soft, almost inaudible. The heart must remain true. The world will test you still. But those who stand together will endure. Alara turned to Kale, her eyes shining with resolve. Then we endure, she said. Not just for ourselves, but for the kingdom, for the people, and for everything the queen has tried to protect. Kale smiled, the first truly unguarded smile he had allowed himself in weeks. Endure, yes, and live, truly live. They descended into the castle gardens, walking side by side. The flowers were bathed in the soft light of morning, and the fountains sparkled with the clarity of new beginnings. For the first time, They moved through the castle without the weight of shadows pressing upon them, without the constant tension of trials or whispers. The castle had been tested along with them, and now it seemed to recognize their strength, their courage, and the bond that had grown between them. Days passed, and the kingdom slowly adjusted to the new understanding. Kale and Alara's presence together brought a sense of calm and reassurance. The nobles observed their unity, the people sensed their courage, and even the castle itself seemed at peace. The queen, now older and more reflective, watched her daughter and Kale with a mix of pride and satisfaction. "You have both learned well," she said one evening, speaking to them in the quiet of her chambers. "Power, courage, and love are not separate, they are intertwined. Remember this and you will guide the kingdom wisely." Alara inclined her head. "We will, mother," Kale bowed slightly, "and we will honor the lessons of the castle, your majesty." The queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. Then the kingdom is in capable hands, and the bond you share is stronger than the shadows that sought to test you." Alara and Kale left the chamber together, hand in hand, feeling a sense of relief, triumph, and quiet wonder. The trials had shaped them, the shadows had tested them, and the queen's challenges had taught them courage, trust, and the power of unity. As they walked through the castle halls, Kale glanced at Alara. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. "The weight of the past and the freedom of the future," Alara nodded, her eyes bright. "I do. We have endured and we have grown, and now we can choose the path we walk together." Kale squeezed her hand gently. "Then let us walk it side by side." The castle stood behind them, silent now but ever watchful, a guardian of history and secrets. Outside, the kingdom basked in the light of morning, unaware of the trials that had shaped the hearts of its future leaders. Kale and Alara stepped into that light, their bond unbroken, their courage unwavering, and their hearts united. For the first time, the shadows had receded, the castle's tests were complete, and the prophecy had been fulfilled, not through fear or command, but through love, trust, and the strength of two hearts standing together. And as they gazed at the horizon, the world seemed filled with possibility, with promise, and with the knowledge that even in a kingdom of shadows, love and courage could triumph. The dawn had come.